questions before the session about what we'll be covering. So just reiterating that it's really about the carrier fees or carrier initiative fees, which is a new feature that we're introducing in ICOS going forward, and it's additional to the existing ways for carriers to raise fees, which we will also stay. We will have a separate session in the future for experts raising fees. So it is not a session for experts, it's really on carriers. And the last note is we're going to record the call. I see Ali already started the recording, so if you don't want to be recorded, it's a chance to drop off and listen to the recording later on. And with that, I'll hand off to Charles, who's running through the presentation. And Charles, if you want to start, you can.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry about that.
Right.
I'm just trying to get hold of my mute button. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. And I'll just take you through the presentation. As Massimo's mentioned, this is showing you what we're planning for ICOS portal carrier fees. So we're going to do a quick overview of ICOS and then take you through the carrier fee transactions. And at the end, we're going to have an opportunity for some questions and some out there. As most of you will know, ICOS is the claims orchestration service, which we're developing as part of DPS, and we're going to hold all claims related information. The general idea is to be able to consume all the support and services that we currently have, which is including LinkClaim and WriteBack, and have that flexibility for our brokers and carriers to interact regardless of the company's digital maturity. So as we said, this presentation here is really focusing on carrier fees. And to start with, when we're on our portal, the carrier will be, so just for carrier fees, we are only going to limit this functionality to the lead carrier on a claim. So the second agreement parties or the follow carriers will not be able to access the feature, at least for now. Another feature is that the transaction will not be the first transaction on the claim. It will follow at least an FNOL would have been released by the broker. Doesn't have to be completed or agreed yet, that transaction, but at least released by the broker. And a key feature of the fee transaction raised by the carrier is that it will have the ability to be completed out of sequence to other transactions that are on the claim.
And sorry, Charles, to stop you for a second. We got a question from Rich. What's the question? Sorry.
Hi, Charles. Just the issue is it's not the lead that creates the fee transaction. It's invariably the expert or the expert fee portal. That's just a key assumption there. It looks incorrect. So, for example, we got probably Kim is going to raise the same point. You got other fee experts that are on the call. It'll be them that are raising the transaction, not me as the carrier.
Correct. So as I mentioned earlier, so this is a new feature that we're introducing in the portal that will enable carriers as well as the expert to raise fees if they wish to do so. We will run another session for experts. So that's the feature that you're referring to.
Okay, all right. I hate to talk over you. It's just that the slide says only lead carrier on the claim would be able to create a fee portal, and right. You've got experts on the call today who are heavily invested in this.
Correct,
if that slide should read, for the purposes of this call, only lead carriers can. But in addition, experts will be able to.
Correct, yeah. And also Velonetti can also create. Across the system, there are different participants who can create fees. This session is purely for carriers, and when it comes to carriers, only the leads can create transactions. We will have a separate section and we'll also cover experts, and in that session will be experts driven, so we're not talking about carriers anymore.
Just a second.
Okay.
Do I
Steve,
ask for?
you have a question?
And we got a few more questions from Kim. Sorry, Kim, go on.
I saw in your email earlier that you were saying this is only available for singleton risks. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that is correct. So initially, for carriers to be able to enable them to raise fees, we are going to initially release it only for singleton business. To see
Okay,
the
so
traction of the feature and then expand as needed.
so then it's not the lead carrier on the claim, it's the only carrier on the claim.
Correct.
By default, yes.
By
Yeah.
default.
Okay, right. That takes a lot of subsequent questions about agreement parties, etc. away.
Mhm.
So that
Right.
that works for me.
Shall we have one more question?
Steve, yeah.
Hello, it's not really a question, it's just following up on Rich's point. I think, Rich, I see this as being an alternative, or the alternative to like the direct fees that get emailed through to Exchanging today. I see this as being the replacement to that, as opposed to being stuff that currently is processed through parallel UCRs. This I see as being the replacement for direct fees.
Understood. Okay, thanks. And so,
Right. In addition to how you guys can submit today as well.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I'll continue. I'm pretty sure you see a bit more as we continue the transaction. Okay. So the first page that the carrier will see when creating a transaction will be to create a transaction reference as just you make sure that the transaction is unique within the claim. So every other data on this field will be read-only. I know it looks like there's the toggle button there, but it should be defaulted to read-only. So and then there will be an opportunity for us to load a document in here. It will be mandatory. So something related to that particular fee transaction. So whether it's an invoice or an email related to the fee that we are about to create a transaction for. And then we have some slightly different screens for ILU, Lerma, and Lloyds here. On this page here, this is the financial details page where the entry would be made for the fee transaction itself. So you have the order of settlement. If there's any VAT applicable to that particular transaction, there's an opportunity to capture the VAT amount in here. The exchange rate, if the fee is raised in, let's say, the US dollars and we want to settle in GBP, there'll be an exchange rate here. A settlement currency can be selected and settlement amount entered in manually. And then there are also going to be some optional information notes that can be entered here to be captured for this transaction. So another key thing here is that there could be a maximum of 3 currencies that can be captured. So if the broker has already entered 2 currencies, we'll be able to add another currency if it's not the currency in which we want to use. But if the broker had already added a maximum of 3 currencies, so bear in mind that this is just phase 1. Yeah, if the broker's already entered a maximum of 3 currencies, we will not have that capability of being able to add a 4th currency, at least at the first phase of the transaction. For Lerma, it's slightly different. In Lerma, at the moment, we have the capability of being able to capture a lead reserve. We'll give the opportunity for the carrier to be able to adjust the reserves that they've entered and also the ability to then enter the settlement similar to what is happening on the INU screen. And for Lloyd's, we have the ability to capture the lead reserves both in indemnity as well as lead reserve fees. So this would be an opportunity as well for the carrier to make adjustments to those reserves on this particular page, as well as the order of settlement, which follows suit. But so everything is similar. It's just that we do have specifics. And then, so these are the fields that will be captured, as you can see, for each currency. It's pretty strict. And then, and the final bit will be the release page. So similar to what the broker does today, there'll be a release page where the OSND is captured and the transaction is. But for this particular, for the carrier, for these carrier fees, there'll be OSNDs that have already been entered in by the broker, and these will be defaulted onto this particular screen. So there'll be a read-only, and the only other additional information we'll be able to do will be the additional details on this particular page, as well as confirming that the transaction has been, we're ready to release that transaction. And then it will be released similar to the way in which a broker released this claim. So before I go into this page, the next step after this will be, we will go through the same agreement process as we would for any other transaction once it's been released. So once we release the transaction, it now becomes a transaction that will then be available to be responded to, similar to other transactions, as if they were released by the broker. Sorry, someone's raised their hands. Question?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just curious, just seeing those screens and the financials going in. I'm just curious from a system point of view to flow. So we're a right back vendor, and looking at those screens, how will that information get into our system?
So via right back.
So in that case, where will the financials, because they look like individual financials on the fee that's being added, but in terms of the indemnity and fee and the separation and how that would flow in based on the transaction, I'm still just a bit unsure how.
So we're talking about these screens here?
Yeah, so is the financials are going to be aggregated?
So the financials will be per transaction. So this will be for this specific transaction. Yeah. So with settlements, this will inherit the so we don't have the broker reserves in this page yet, for example. Yeah. So one of the questions we do have, and it will be on that last slide, will be to have a little chat about reserves, how we want the fee transactions to impact on reserves entered by the broker. So we have that. We need some guidance on that particular subject. In terms of this particular transaction, this would be the settlement transaction will be for that particular transaction. For those where we already have reserves in place, these will be inherited from the latest transactions. Yeah, so these are the reserves entered in by the lead themselves. So if the lead has disagreed with what or the leaders decided that they want to have slightly separate reserves from what was entered by the broker, they have the opportunity to enter them on this particular page. They would also have similar on the lead response page where they can change their fees. Yeah, I don't look like I'm answering your question, am I?
Yeah. So it's exactly that. It's that broker reserve that's put in because you know we just have indemnity previously paid. So it's looking at what's being put in here and what the broker reserve is, and how can we separate? Because at the moment it looks like they'd have to be aggregated on the one movement, because we can't have a transaction that's a broker reserve and then a subsequent transaction which is a carrier fee financial, because it's just going to cause chaos in terms of financials.
Yeah. So I mean, currently what we have is the broker reserves do not get affected by the lead reserves that are entered. We actually don't share the lead reserves with the brokers. So what stays on the claim really is the broker reserves, and those are only changed by the broker currently. Am I correct?
Yeah, you're correct. I think the question goes more to how do the systems operate to each other. Bearing in mind you've got these transactions that are being launched potentially out of sequence with different numbers. How do we see, or how does any write-back system manage to differentiate a broker-loaded transaction with class financials that say X versus a lead-created fee transaction that says Y? How do we see the wood for the trees?
So what we're considering is the lead would have the opportunity to adjust their own reserves as shown on those screens. Where they've entered reserves, they'll have the opportunity to adjust their own reserves through this particular transaction. We do not see this impacting the reserves entered by the broker. And we do have a question here. What impact will these fees have on the reserves entered on the claims, which is the reserves actually entered by the broker? Because we're out of sequence, we really cannot truly let this impact what has been entered by the broker. Plus, are these fees with the broker? You know, is the broker aware of these fees, and are those fees part of the outstandings entered by the broker? So it would be wrong for us to allow that to impact reserves entered by the broker, and we are not proposing that.
The fact you're creating another mechanism to get to exchanging that says my view of the reserve, be it fees or indemnity, is a new process, a new opportunity to tell exchanging processing of my latest view of indemnity or fees. Regardless of what goes to the broker, you have a disconnect here, a new process. And the question remains, how does that get to the right back service providers? How do we faithfully see in a separate service what our view of the numbers are, whatever that view is?
Okay.
There are some, sorry to jump in, Charles, there are some sessions that are currently happening with the right back community to understand how this transaction will feed into right back, but it's similar to what's happening for parallel UCR for experts. So initially the fees, it is portal only, and also can only be agreed in the portal only out of sequence because of those restrictions. We are progressing the right back session that we're having. We get more clarity on how it will feed into right back as well. What we do know about that out of sequence and how there would be an impact on those systems.
I just think you're introducing a new feed for someone as stupid as me dealing with claims to give you more information, another view, the latest view on two key fields, fee and indemnity reserve. And that's just going to cause chaos as it hits the system out of sequence.
Yeah. Understood. That's why initially we are only trialing this with singleton claims. It's quite limited at this stage, just to see how we play out in the system while we have right back as well.
Sorry, we have other questions out there?
Sure, I'm happy to go next. Tom McArthur from Ecliptic. I just want to understand the process here. So from what you've explained, if I've understood this correct, and tell me differently if not, the carrier will be able to upload a fee transaction that needs to be settled to a fee expert of some sort. You then said that will then be presented as if it was a broker transaction. So the carrier will upload it, the carrier will approve it then themselves. Is that approved by the same individual? And then does it follow the normal process where it will go to central processing, DXC to approve? And then how's that settled? Because if the carrier is uploading it, does that settlement of the fee then go to the carrier to then release to the fee expert, or is that being settled directly? And if it's being settled directly, where are these details being stored for payment?
Okay. Sure. I think I can answer some of those questions. So the carrier, when the carrier releases the transaction, they will have to go in back and respond to the transaction separately. Now, as you can see here, there's a statement here. We said within the portal, the individual who released the transaction, so the individual within the organization that entered the transaction will not be allowed to respond to the same transaction. So they will not be able to authorize that transaction, if that makes sense. Yeah. So if you enter the transaction within your organization, someone else has to then come in and authorize that particular transaction on the portal. Okay. Now, and that will go, and that would then lead them at that point to how the transaction gets settled. So currently, one of the proposals and one of the key considerations here is that these transactions would only be able to be settled directly via Vitesse, in which the settlement process does have a way of capturing who the recipients are and who the payee is.
And you're expecting who to do the test onboarding? Are you expecting the carriers to enter the details of the expert, because, or are you expecting the experts to go into the test to upload their details?
Massimo, do we understand?
Yeah, we're expecting. Yeah, we understand. So we're expecting the expert to already been onboarded into the platform. So essentially, they're registered organizations, you know, carriers and brokers. There will be experts as well that have been onboarded with their Vitesse details, and the selection of who can be paid will be limited only those ones.
Sure. So, I mean, I run the product for Gemini, and I can tell you firsthand that is a massive task you're expecting the market to undertake. We've onboarded over 1,000 experts onto our platform, and getting them to register, set up bank details is not a small task. And if you're expecting them to do this twice within that platform, it's going to be a lot of work, especially for the expert community.
We understand.
Okay.
So we have some other questions. Who's next?
Hi, it's Vikas from DockerSoft. Just following on to some of those questions. So just so we're clear, if I take a very simple example, let's say the broker creates an FNOL, puts in $1,000 reserve to it. The carrier goes in now and creates this fee transaction for, say, and puts in a reserve of 500. What we typically see from the write back part of it is we get the second transaction coming through saying that the total incurred or the reserve on the claim is now 1,500. And that's kind of where Anthony and others were kind of getting to. So we don't get a split to now say 500 is the reserve for fees. We only get 1,500 that comes out on the other side of it. So just, I think that's where it's going to start getting quite messy. And how does this, or if you're going to keep this completely outside it, then if the broker does transaction 3, ups the reserve to 2,000, are you then saying the 500 will be kept out of it, and then right back will only get to 2,000 as the reserve, not 2,500? So I think that's where I think a lot of the confusion is. And a subsequent question is, what's the impact to SCMs as well off the back of it? What's the financials that are going to go on to the SCM as well as a result of when it's being agreed?
Okay. Vikas, we're talking about Lloyd's here, yes?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Massimo, do you want to talk about this? We can take it away and respond back to people.
Yeah. So on the SCM, sorry, I think one of the questions was about the SCM. So if it's Lloyd's, it goes through technical processing as any other transaction. So the SCM will come out of that And as part of the technical processing, it will be broken down into the different claim office references that will populate the EDIs.
Vikas, I thought your question was about reserves and how the
Yeah, no.
reserves will be on the SCMs
Yeah,
if they're
and I
responded
think
to out
for
of
the
sequence.
most part that applies across Lloyd's and company.
Yeah, no, yeah, I mean, exactly. But then it's more what are the financials on those SCMs that come out? Because are they accumulated or not? Are they? Yeah, I think that's where it's going to get quite complicated. Yeah.
One of the key,
Sorry.
we have to take it offline, but one of the key concerns we have as well on our side is because this is out of sequence. Yeah, the reserves will be impacted, and we don't think that it would be wise for these type of fees to impact on the reserves that had been entered especially by the broker. And we need to just think outside the box on this one, because some transactions could be out there with some reserves, and then we bring these transactions in and then settle them out of sequence. You know, it does have an impact on what the true end reserves would be. So we need to think about it outside the box on this one. We'll probably need, Massimo will probably need some involvement with IU and Lloyd's on this, please.
Yeah, so I think on the SCM and the financial, we'll take a look and come back to this forum.
We have 2 other questions out there. LMA meeting room 3.
I'm not sure. I think Steve and Simon might be in front of me actually.
Yeah, sorry, I can just see. Steve?
Should I go? So I think the broker reserve is a little bit of a red herring, because the broker reserve is only ever an indicative reserve that should be confirmed or otherwise by the leader. So these should never impact the broker reserve. I think there may be a relatively simple fix if we think that we should maybe mandate that leaders put their own reserve on these transactions when they respond to them, because then that way they're reinstating what they think the right reserve should be. And this is no more confusing and complicated than things are today when you have broker entered transactions coming through ECF and then carrier created transactions that are going directly to exchanging that are impacting the financials and the reserves. So I think we just need to think about how this can make the process much more straightforward, because we won't have those other non-ECF stuff going on through exchanging, because everything should be being funneled through ICOS. So it's an opportunity to make this much more straightforward and much more clear than it has been in the past. But we just need to make sure that we kind of enforce leader reserving when it needs to be enforced, to make sure that we don't kind of get into a bit of a mess that Anthony and Vikas and Rich have all articulated. And just sorry, one other quick point while I'm here as well. This thing about the same person not agreeing the transaction, again, I don't think we need to dwell too much on that, because that can happen today as well. So, you know, if I send a request to exchanging and ask them to make a payment for me, nobody's validating that as far as I can tell. Nobody's making sure that I'm not paying myself. So I don't think we need to spend too much time on that. It'd be good if we can get some controls around that into the system, but I don't think that should be the focus.
Agreed. And in the portal, we can ensure that the same user is not authorizing the transaction.
Just going back to the point on lead reserves, though, ILU doesn't have lead reserves, does it?
No, that's why ILU was only being. That's why just go back a little bit. So on the ILU screens, I was going to mention that there are no reserving capabilities on ILU at all. But for Lerma, there are opportunities to enter lead reserves, and so they will be able to adjust on Lerma, and also for the Lloyd's market, they'll be able to adjust the lead reserves in there. So we need to think how we would like ILU's reserving to go, or what impact will it have for ILU at all, if any. So we'll probably need someone from INE to support us on that. Simon?
Thanks. Yes, Simon Jordan, DXE. Just on out of sequence responses, I got the impression from the right back deep dive last week that Sean Keeble led that whether out of sequence responses will be allowed initially is still up for discussion or still being considered, you know, whether or not to enable it for phase 1.
They will be there for portal and fees only, so maybe that was in context of something else.
Okay, I'll check with her. Thank you.
And now back to the LMA meeting room.
Hi, so it's Matt Young from Limos. Massimo, I think you mentioned separately that this functionality, if I got it right, this is kind of an additional capability that's being offered to MAs that want to use it. And there will still be a process for third parties to manage reserves on behalf of MAs as currently. Is that correct?
So this, sorry, for carriers to be able to raise fees, yes, it's additional to what they currently do today.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry. So the existing functionality, so where we have third parties that manage reserves and fees on behalf of the MAs, will that still be, will that functionality, as is now, will that functionality be offered in ICOS, or is that something that you're saying is still needs to be confirmed?
I think we'll have to take that separately because we still need confirmation on how that would be handled. Because essentially, it's not longer a carrier doing that transaction. We're talking about a third party. So yes, it might be slightly different. So we'll have to have a separate section of that.
Process as is today, so it's not a change from what they're doing today.
No.
Okay, so it's okay. So if that's something to still kind of be taken offline and looked at, is that going to be wrapped into the PUCR session, or is it another separate session that we're talking about for that one, please?
I think for a third party, we might need to either wrap it up with the Parallel UCR session, or we might need to have a separate session altogether, depending on the complexity of it.
Okay. I think that is quite key for the 53 MAs, I think, that signed up to certainly Gemini. I know there are other expert management systems out there. If those expert management systems don't work on the 1st of July and MAs have to self-manage, I can't speak to the MAs, but as people on the call, I think that will be a significant issue.
Yeah, no, we're expecting this service to work, but we might do a session altogether to bottom out what the requirement might be.
Okay. Right, thank you.
Sorry, it's Barry Lodge. I work at Limos. So how are you going to collate all of those requirements, or have you already got a design against a set of principal requirements? Because we're just concerned about the timescales. Because I hoped some of the discussion today would be around third-party roles, data and processes, because we've raised a lot of points around this since October. We've engaged several times. So the purpose of this session is, it feels like a show and tell, but obviously the practice that is operating in the market, granted through parallel UCRs, where are we? Where are you with those collation of requirements, design, and then build phase? Because there's obviously quite a lot of concern that we're heading towards July, and we've got a lot of market practice, a lot of third parties who perform these roles that need to be sustained. So is there something you can share with us that collates the requirements and gives us playback and then a design assessment stroke build phase?
As I said earlier, this is not a session for Parallel UCR or for experts or for third parties. It's purely on carriers. So those additional topics, we like to take them offline to another session because it is not what we're prepared for on this particular point.
It probably makes sense to do that bit first rather than this bit, which is a separate type of process, which is really quite unique and new. to go through the business as usual process of which I think the majority of attendees thought they were going to get today, and we're not.
Understood. Yeah. So that's, yeah, as mentioned earlier at the beginning of the call, this is purely for carrier fees. There will be a separate session on experts at a later date.
So when at a later date, I mean, we're what, 19 weeks away. When will we get that?
We're anticipating most likely in the next month. It will be March at some stage. We're finishing the session on the right back, and then move on those ones.
I'm very concerned. I know we keep going back on this. I was in the original committee that set up the that was involved in setting up the third-party UCRs in the beginning. Also, we also work on behalf of carriers as well. That took absolutely ages. I just cannot see, if you can't even show us anything or just give us a clue to what is going on. This is all good. I get it. And I don't understand why this is, as other people say, why this is being introduced, and we don't even have a confirmed date of a meeting. I really can't see this happening by July. I'm really, and this affects the market massively. I know there is probably and it does worry me. Everyone's going, oh well, you can use Fees Direct. It seems like third parties have been put on the back burner, expecting everyone to start using Fees Direct and not actually be able to use the services they're currently using.
Understood. I'll repeat again. This session is about the carrier fees. I understand your concern about Power UCR and experts. However, this is not the session. So unfortunately, we're not prepped for that topic. So I understand your concern. I can escalate it again through Velonetic, but unfortunately, we're not in a position to provide the answer you're looking for on that particular topic.
So it's something we'll take offline. We'll get back to you. Do we have any other questions at all related to the carrier fees at all? Or are we exhausted?
Just this is reputationally quite damaging, as I think Stuart opined. It looks like you're trying to close down functionality to anyone other than Velonetic. That's what it looks like. I know that isn't the case, but not being out, I expected to join the call today with a warm, fuzzy feeling, and I'm even more terrified.
Okay, to probably try and put this into context a little, the existing functionality remains, which includes third-party providers who will continue to be able to do what they do today. This was seen as additional functionality that may be of use to carriers. So that's really what the session has been about, is to understand this is what you will be able to do in addition to what you do today. And whilst it's only focusing on that, we understand that there was a conversation that would be wanted on how experts manage fees, and that will be coming in March. Kim, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I think the concern that I seem to be hearing is that this is talking about new functionality. So great, but no one's using it, right? So it wasn't necessary. Yet necessary functionality is not going to be presented to the market. People aren't going to understand how to use it, whether it works as presented, whether there is change required, whether they need to train their vendors, whether they need to provide any assistance or, you know, standard operating procedures, etc. And they're going to get that in March, ready for testing in April and sign off in what, May? I think people are genuinely concerned that they haven't seen a lot of the stuff which they're expecting should be built, and clearly, you know, it's in a greater state of flux than they were expecting it to be at this point in time.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Yeah, so I don't know if any of the people have been to the sessions that there were 4 sessions in February that Velonetic have been holding around sort of walking through the platforms and the way that testing will be managed as well. That might kind of be a helpful way to see about some of the progression. I know I kind of certainly understand that this is a new functionality. Whether it's kind of people seeing it as business critical, it's a case of this is new functionality that could be made available, sharing it with you to explore what that looks like, understand the concerns. Will it be ready in time? Will it be ready for testing? It's optional anyway, so it's not compulsory. But yeah, understand your concerns about readiness.
But I think that was the point that Rich was trying to make. This is optional, it's not compulsory, and yet some of the non-optional stuff is behind this in the queue, and that it seems a bit
back to front,
cart before horse.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah,
I was trying to find a polite way of saying that.
No,
Yeah, no.
exactly, Kim.
Thanks,
And
Kim.
we thought this was going to be a like for like. So, you know, to introduce new functionality that could have an impact. And again, I'm just talking about right back and the flow of that and what's going to happen in terms of financials and the messaging is a big concern. So I know we've been on right back deep dive last week and there was more questions than answers, and that seems to be still a long way behind. So to focus resources on building what's there today would be better, you know, time well spent.
Okay, Massimo, obviously that's probably something for you to pick up and take back. I'll hand back over because there seems to be a lot more questions, so I'll hand back over to you.
Actually, Alan, it's Matt again. I was just wondering if we could just clarify your narrative there, or the comment that I think you said that Valnetic have confirmed the existing functionality will be provided. I think I'm paraphrasing what you just said, but my understanding from what Massimo just said was actually we need a workshop to look at that.
Yeah.
So can we, not necessarily on this call, but and certainly the deck doesn't say that. So we could do some clear narrative, please, around confirmation that the current third-party ability or expert managers, so I'm talking about people like Ecliptic, will still be able to do exactly what they do in the same way as they do today. Because the other thing is, if we're talking about a session mid-March and possibly a build April, testing in May, that is for the Valnetic change. If any of those experts have to do any changes on their side, we're out of time, because that's not enough window for them to do any change before 1st July go live. So I'm probably reiterating some of the concerns.
Yeah, but it's also the impact on some of the downstream processes, because if right back vendors now, as Rich was saying earlier, if they need to disassociate, if you like, the Ecliptic transaction from the broker transaction, and Simon's point about sequencing and agreeing stuff out of sequence and other people's comments on previously settled and reserve build and whatever else, and how do we disassociate them, it's not just what Ecliptic might have to do or anybody in that boat. It's not what Valnetic might need to do and anything in that boat. It's what is the potential impact of downstream processes need to be understood, and they can be built. And if that workshop isn't taking place, and I thought we were still waiting for a CCN to be signed for some of this third-party stuff, so I don't know where we're at now.
Yeah, sorry, Alan, going back to you.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think it's really back to a degree, Massimo, one, confirming about the existing functionality. It almost seems that perhaps the expert call may have been better to have first, then this one, but we've done it this way around. Massimo's kind of said that this is the limited focus for this call. But can you kind of just give some reassurance around the existing process, if you can?
Yeah, so I'll bring it up, with Valnetic, so we can provide some statement around what will be provided on the question that were raised around the expert and third-party access. So.
And the sooner we can confirm the date for that third-party call, the sooner people will be more reassured that it's in hand.
Yeah, no worries.
Can I just ask who actually requested this function? I'm just intrigued why this function's come in straight away and who in the market have actually requested this. Why has this even come up? I don't really understand until we're obviously running the systems that we're currently using now.
It was part of the requirements originally, as we are releasing the features in ICOS on the portal, this feature is just a built-on, or it's an add-on to those features already built.
I still don't answer who requested it, because I don't understand why we've got it. I can understand it being better later on, and it is only for singletons as well. So I really don't understand why this has got priority at all, and who's actually requested it, because it just seems really strange to me. I'm not sure if anyone else sort of knows, or who in the market has gone out and said, "Yep, we need this." It doesn't make sense.
The claims requirements, Steve, were part of the original claims work some time ago around, and so it was the market convened, said what they wanted, looking for from a new system. Then that was actually related back to what was being built in ICOS. So it hasn't come as a random offside. It might seem a random request, but it was part of those original requirements from the market. Hopefully that answers your question.
Can I have a go add into that a little bit? So sure. If you look at how fees are processed today in the marketplace, it's kind of three ways it happens, right? So the broker does it very rarely, but the broker can do it still through ECF. An expert fee collector or an expert themselves can have a central settlement number and put a parallel UCR into the system. And then the third way to do it is for the carrier to directly contact Exchanging via email and fill in a form and getting them to push it through Fees Direct, right? This is Fees Direct. That's how you should look at this. This is the replacement for Fees Direct, but rather than me as a carrier having to fill in a form and send it via email, and bearing in mind as well, Exchanging want to move away from email submissions full stop into their estate, this replaces that.
Right.
And I think, and Massimo will probably shoot me for saying this, but I think the functionality for experts is going to look just like this, because this is the equivalent of a broker setting up a transaction, or you setting up a parallel UCR in ICOS and then waiting for the carrier to agree it. So it's going to look pretty much the same. The only difference is going to be the access control rights. So how can we make sure you're allowed to go into that broker claim and set up that claim transaction? Because at the moment you do it through the parallel process, which has got all of that kind of third-party access right type stuff that you worked on many years ago as part of ECF2. So that's how I see this. I see this as being essential functionality because it has to replace the direct fee process. It's got to be essential functionality because I can't see any other way that they're going to be able to allow you guys to do the same thing in ICOS. So I think that's why this is happening, because this bit's been built already and they're just showing us what the screens look like. That doesn't negate any of the things everybody else has said about their concerns around how sequencing will work and how the reserve should work and all of that stuff. I completely agree with all of that. And I also completely agree that, you know, given that the vast majority of the fee bills that go through the marketplace go through the third party route, then maybe that might have been a better way to have this session, but we are where we are. But I think I'm hoping that's clarified that a little bit.
Oh, that makes things more clarified. Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions on the carrier fees part?
I'm sorry, Massimo, just one more thing from me. One thing that was that I couldn't see on the screens was, how do you select who you want to pay? Because I think that comes to Tom's point about onboarding. And obviously, you've said that they need to be onboarded with a test before, which presumably is exactly the same as it is today with anything we push through direct fees, you know, because that goes via the test today as well. So that expert has to be set up there. But where do you pick them? How do you pick who you want to pay?
Sorry, as part of the screens, there is one in there where it's possible to select the expert that is going to be paid. I don't know if we have it on the screens in here in the mock-up. Then we have.
I didn't see it, okay. But it will be a selectable field, will it?
Yeah.
It will be on the agreement page, yes. So when the transactions been authorized, it will be something that would be by that. And that's why we're using Vitesse, if that makes sense.
But Steve, I don't think we have it in this wireframe that we're showing now. So, but there will be the option for essentially when the carrier is creating the transaction, we'll be able to select which expert they're paying and it's been onboarded. And then once the transaction has been agreed, there will also be the selection for Vitesse to be done.
Are you planning on storing details at company level, branch level? Sorry, it's Tom MacArthur again. Company level, branch level, bank level. I mean, how much data of the expert are you planning on storing in this new?
It will be a part of the onboarding that is going to be done for all the organization. So there could be multiple entries depending on the currencies or the sub-organization they might have.
I think, Tom, it feels to me as if it's going to, the selection, the drop-down selections almost needs to play back the Vitesse's view of those accounts, right? Because what happens today is if I send something through to direct fees, I need to fill in a form and I need to put banking details in there. I'm sure when Velanetics asks for that payment to be made through Vitesse, if it's already set, if those details match, they've already get that expert onboarded, then they just pay that one. So I would hope it's going to be some kind of, fairly detailed kind of drop down list that says it's Clyde & Co for their London bank account number ending in 0007 or whatever, something like that.
And then I suppose, Massimo, I know you don't want to talk about it in this session. I know you've said that, but I suppose within the world of the parallel UCR and fee processing, we will obviously need to be set up to process fees and be paid direct from central processing. So there will be a separate, I know, Steve, you mentioned the look and feel will be the same, but I'm guessing for our processing, it will be different in terms of we will be getting paid and passing the funds on rather than that going via Vitesse. And therefore, the way that we create a transaction will actually be different to the screens we're seeing.
The creation of the transaction itself would be fairly similar to what you've seen on the screen now. Some of the options, depending who you're paying, will be slightly different, but the bulk of the screen or the sequence of events in the screen will pretty much be the same. For experts, it would be perhaps limited data that they can see, so it would be limited to perhaps the UCR and a few other information.
But yeah, I suppose the concern there is there's a lot of room for error, because if you're putting through every single bank account that's stored in Vitesse, that's not limited by claim, by carrier, by UMR, whatever it may be. I mean, you're giving the ability for anyone to pay anyone within the platform with no validation on any bank account. So, I mean, that's...
Tom, I kind of feel, I mean, again, I'm just making stuff up here because I've got no idea if this is how it's going to be designed, but I'd imagine the transaction reference would be the key in the same way as it is today with parallel UCRs, right? So if you've logged on using your third-party access rights to the portal on a broker's UCR and you put in 1766 for your broker number, right? That should pull through from your logon details and say, this is a 1766 transaction. The payment goes to them, as opposed to if I go on as Beazley, I'd expect it to pull, my transaction reference might be, I don't know, begin with AFB or something, and that's saying this is a Beazley submitted direct fee one. Beazley can't get paid. They're going to go and ask for, they're going to select a payee, and that's going to go, via Vitesse for payment. I'd expect it to work like that, but who knows?
There's validation behind
it. Was just,
so
it was just to say because Steve, to your example there is to say what's limiting the bank accounts that you can select. So are you in Vitesse going to be stored as a carrier? Are you then going to have several different bank accounts and experts linking to your organization? Because otherwise you'll be able to instruct and pay an expert that's on Brit's panel, for example.
That's fine. And I hope that works that way, because we ask Exchanging to pay us today for in some weird situation. So that does need to happen. But I think there should be controls around that. It comes down to more about the individual person not being able to be the one who pushes a request for, I think, as opposed to it being the organisation. But I think that would be fine.
And well done, Tom, for taking us into the expert session. But again, probably need to hold those kind of questions for that session. I think Massimo's been through this element, take the learnings that perhaps the expert session could have been held first, then followed by this one. And this is certainly not about precluding people from doing anything. It is about, as Steve said, replacing functionality that's already there, but putting it within the digital services environment based on the requirements that the market asked for. So is there any other questions relating to this particular meeting for the carrier fees, or are we okay to wrap up? Okay, looks like that's no more questions. So Massimo, thank you for taking us through it. Feedback taken on board about the ordering of these sessions as well. Anything to close, Massimo?
No, once we have a session scheduled for the expert, obviously, send an invite out, but it shouldn't be too long in the future.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Okay, thanks all for joining. Thanks for your time, and thanks for your feedback.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.